that you will have the opportunity to be educated. And you have a debt to these people. You've got to come back and pay that debt by serving your people.
In a feudal system, everyone is beholden to the master. And this is what Zulfikar Bhutto, Benazir's father, came from, and what he was trying to change so that there could be some progress in Pakistan. He saw that countries that do well economically have to have some kind of a middle class that give the people the opportunity to move upwards.
For Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, education was the key for everything, not only for his own children, but for the people of Pakistan, because he knew with education, people will be able to stand on their own feet. They'll be productive members of society, and you can create democracy.
It was my father who was against the gender constraints of my time. He enabled me to appreciate that a woman is not a lesser creature.
I wore the veil once. When I was 13 years old, it's really like an initiation right into the world of adulthood. I remember when I wore it, it's hot, it's cumbersome, it's long, you trip over it. You can see the world through that black fabric. And it's not a clear world, it's a muted grayish world. Papa and Mommy went to their bedroom, and Mommy said, Pinky wore her burqa. I made her wear it for the first time. Then he was quiet for a while, quite thoughtful. Then he just looked up, said there's no need for her to wear it. It was an extremely bold step for him to take, because until that time, no woman from the Bhutto family who reached adulthood had ever gone without burqa. Not too long ago, I sat where you now sit, tramping to class in subarctic temperatures, fighting for books at Hillis Library, cramming for exams.
Oh, baby, baby, it's a wild world.
I met her first day of freshman year at Harvard. She was 16, I was 18.
She was quiet, she was studious, she made a small circle of friends. But this was 1969, and 6 months of her arrival, all the dorms went co-ed.
We were in the same dorm. She talked a lot about her own family. We have a lot in common. Benazir comes from a political family. She was very interested in politics, was interested in the world.
Not only was she becoming a grown-up, but she was independent for the first time, and her life was under her control, and no one else could control it, not Mummy, not Daddy, just Benazir.
This was the height of the Vietnam War, and she saw firsthand the power of the people to change a policy and to bring down a government.
She was very much exposed to the ideas of equal rights for women, and that was something that very much influenced her life.
It was the first time that I was in an environment where women were treated as full participants in society. It was that early experience, perhaps more than anything else, that shaped my political being.
India and Pakistan, of course, have fought numerous wars, but I think none was more bitter than the War of 1971.
India dismembered Pakistan, it split East and West Pakistan, East Pakistan becoming Bangladesh.
The loss was a humiliation to Pakistan. Not only had their geography changed, but their national sense of self was changed.
East Pakistan was a part of Pakistan, made with our own blood and our own sweat. If India thinks that she's rubbing Pakistan nose to the ground, and that Pakistan can come to a settlement in the way that she's behaving and has behaved in the past, that will then not bring about agreement. There will be endless bloodshed and confusion and chaos.
Bhutto was immediately rushed to the United Nations to negotiate peace with India.
It was great drama for the UN in its relatively young phase.
Yesterday, my 11-year-old son telephoned me from Karachi. And he said to me, do not come back with a document of surrender. We do not want to see you back in Pakistan if you come like that. We will fight. We'll go back and fight. My country hearkens for me. Why should I waste my time here in the Security Council? You can take your Security Council. Here you are. I'm going.
The UN was not going to intervene on the side of Pakistan. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto made it very clear that Pakistan would not surrender. He didn't come to New York to surrender. That propelled him into a very strong national figure.
Bhutto could rally the masses, mesmerize the masses.
He formed Pakistan People's Party. To form Pakistan People's Party, he had a very simple, very popular slogan: food, clothes, and shelter. People of Pakistan were hurting because of the poverty, lack of education. There was no hope of prosperity.
Bhutto just swept the polls. People were waiting for change.
People who chanted the meaning of Pakistan is food, clothing, and shelter won the elections with massive majority.
He was the leader. Every organization, army, everybody was supporting him throughout.
He moved rapidly to make peace with India. Certainly his greatest diplomatic triumph was the Simla Accords.
I met Mrs. Gandhi in 1972 when I accompanied my father to Simla. I was wearing my first sari and I was very concerned that I might trip over the sari and it would come undone in front of all the international photographers.
I provided the interest in India. So much newspaper coverage, people wanted to do interviews with me. I was quite overwhelmed. And I remember my father called me one morning and said, have you seen these pictures of yourself? You look like Mussolini there. Be careful.
This was a negotiation in which he didn't have very many cards. After all, India was the victorious power. But using his diplomatic skills, which allowed for the return of some 95,000 Pakistani prisoners of war, reestablished normal relations between the two countries. This was very much a formative experience for Benazir. She watched her father operate. She had a diplomatic role as his hostess, and she absorbed many of his lessons of diplomacy.
My father always said my daughter will make me more proud than Indira made her father. So my father always had the idea that I was a chip off the block.
We met when we were both in England, and I was at Cambridge, she was at Oxford. I was struck from the first moment I met her by her force of life.
She was very much into the sort of undergraduate student environment, whereby she just had lots of friends.
She loved entertaining, she loved having fun.
I remember one year she'd chosen to have an invitation with written in gold, "Darling, what would the party be without you?"
Harvard was a place where she could really be herself. She wasn't in the limelight. At Oxford, there was a large Pakistani community. She was older, and I think she was thinking about her future career.
It was assumed that she would not go into politics. She did an interview shortly as she was to leave Oxford. The headline was, "No politics for the president's daughter." But at the same time, she had her eye on what was going on in Pakistan.
In 1974, India detonated a nuclear explosion. And so now Pakistan faced India that was 8 times the size and which had nuclear weapons.
Once India got the bomb, the Pakistani military started clamoring, telling Bhutto, we want nuclear weapons. Otherwise, how can we compete with the Indians? Bhutto made this famous speech, we will build the nuclear bomb, he announced in public, even if we have to eat grass for 1,000 years.
Bhutto was persuaded by the Ford administration not to go this path.
Dr. Kissinger actually was a friend of my father's and respected him greatly, and he tried to warn him as a friend. So he said, I don't want you to be made a horrible example of, and so you should not develop the nuclear device.
But that didn't quite work with Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. It was the nuclear power that essentially broke down Zulfikar Ali Bhutto and the West.
The whole of the West was very